So why don't we jump 2 questions and answer that question. What was the percentage of the vote for disaffiliation? Sally, you know that number.
I do not know the exact number. At that time, our membership was probably 180, 190, somewhere around there. We had 1 no vote to disaffiliate. So
That sounds pretty phenomenal,
99.9.
doesn't it?
I think it's just really.
We're having a problem with that.
Well, we're not gonna walk away from here unless you're in a hurry to get back until we really talk that part through. Because I really have some comments in all that regard. So let's go back up to, are we ready to move on to that next question? How did it affect our church financially?
No, it didn't.
At that time, they knew we'd sold the parsonage in the
Yes.
meantime. So they knew we had parsonage money and they wanted it.
They got that first.
And so they got that first, right off the top. They wanted that. I thought, well, boy, what if we would have spent it or something?
Yeah.
Well, we wasn't allowed to.
Oh,
Right,
okay.
we could only spend that on the
Parsonage.
building.
Okay, all right. So anyway, so we had to give that to him, and we just kept everything else as much as we
I
did.
think we were down to about $1,000 in the checking account.
Our mission fund looked really good at the time.
Yeah, it did.
But it saved that money.
Yeah,
It did.
it saved the money for the church.
So they could actually take the money from your
Check it.
sale of your parcel.
Oh, yeah.
They took
Yeah.
that, they wanted the checkbook.
Mhm.
Our books were audited. They wanted to know what anybody had.
Well, could they take the church also? But they didn't want this little country church, but they figured, you go there, so far out, nowhere, in the middle of nowhere.
And that's another thing, we wanted a Wesleyan preaching minister. Pastor Paul was one, Pastor D, Wesleyan style. But you go back to the Wesleyan, I think that's Methodist. Those people have been lifelong Methodists. I don't think they could ever argue with being Wesleyan Methodist. That's my link to the past.
I think the best that I could say would be a few things, and that is, you've got to go in front of your people with a complete story. Not just what disaffiliation looks like, but how it will look like beyond disaffiliation. If you don't go with a complete story and you leave gaps, those gaps get filled with doubts, fears, and misinformation. You've got to make sure that you take the complete package. And I would include the financial side of this because it's important. Unless I've missed the numbers along the way, you're able to pay probably somewhere around $150 and change to get a church building that's worth $6.7 million and a parsonage that's worth just under $400,000. Am I about right in that?
Yes.
So for $152,000 or whatever it is, you're getting $7 million worth of property. Now, some may argue, well, this isn't about the money.
That's right, it's not business.
It has a lot to do with this. What are you getting for what you're giving up? The other thing I would say would be, and I want to share some things with you if I may. What do churches look for in a pastor? Here's what they look for. This is a Gallup poll, and I'm going to give this to you, Carol, to take back. Sermon content is what appeals most to churchgoers. 75% want to hear sermons that are relevant to real life. 76% want sermons that teach Scripture. So, what scares me about your hiring a pastor? Very little. Because with all that's going on in our communities, and I use that plural, I would suggest that you'll be better off to hire your own pastor that understands community as well as Bible and Wesleyan, understands your community. Otherwise, you'll get a pastor appointed from Trumbull County, And the first thing you have to do is try to introduce them to Norwalk, which will take, as a practical matter, 2 or 3 years maybe, before they get assimilated into community and understand community concerns. And then about 2 years after that, they get transferred somewhere else. If you can find a pastor, and which you guys did, so I think it's important to get a pastor who is already aware of and embedded in your community and understands your community and knows a lot of the people. To me, that is important. If I understand correctly, if you stay, Brian is ready to retire at the end of June. Am I right about that?
Yes.
So you get a brand new pastor. You have no idea who that is until they introduce that pastor to you. Now I want to share some other information. This is from Christianity Today, and Carol, you'll take all this with you. The largest segment of American Protestants is non-denominational. It's your largest segment now. You would be becoming non-denominational, and you would be joining the largest segment of American Protestants by becoming non-denominational. We all know the United Methodist Church in and of itself is shrinking, and it continues to shrink. So it's not just where it is now, it's where is it going? Pick up on that trend line. It's not the greatest trend line. And you have the opportunity to become non-denominational and be part of the largest segments of American Protestants. There's some good stuff in here. What are your largest churches in Norwalk right now? Non-denominational. Does that surprise me? It doesn't surprise me.
In the Catholic Church, they're actually having, I mean, it's a big presence, but they're shrinking.
They're shrinking, but it's still because of.
But like the chapel is foundation.
The chapel, non-denominational, right? Foundation, non-denominational. You have the opportunity for a new start without losing your Methodist roots. Keep preaching.
I said Methodist roots because that's important.
It is. Hang on to those
It was
Methodist
important
roots.
to a lot of people here too.
We worship, if you walk into our church and didn't know we were no longer United Methodist, you would say, that's Methodist service. That's how we do it.
We had to get new hymnals.
We had to get new hymnals.
They took our
They
hymnals.
took them away.
Yeah.
And this will probably shock you a little bit because I just read this during the past week. You know, sometimes the leadership of this denomination is going so far left that now there's the comment that maybe we ought to get rid of the cross and the flame because it's a reminder of the Ku Klux Klan with their burning crosses. This is how ridiculous this stuff isn't just where it is today, but how ridiculous as to where this could be going.
So did you read that somewhere? Where'd you find out about it?
Have you read that too? I just read this.
I hadn't heard
If
that.
I find it, I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that one, and I know someone will say, oh, I don't believe that.
Let me tell you.
Well, I gotta show them.
Let me tell you. This stuff is true. Barna is a church research firm, and this is a new study from 2020, the year 2020. The state of the church. And they examine, well, actually, this is a summary of the state of the church. This is the actual study. Again, you'll have all this. It talks about trends defining Americans' relationship to churches. There is less church loyalty, there's less denominational loyalty, and there is a lot of church hopping, because people do want to go where they're being fed. And I'm telling you what's important, majority of churchgoers do value church attendance. They want to experience positive moments. They don't want to be brought into church and beat up on, feeling guilty when they leave. And it's also important that they feel a part of a mission. How impactful are you with your missions? They want to believe that churches are useful to the community where they're located. I think you have to pay attention to these things because these research firms actually do pick up large samples to where they get good information. As a church, we have to be meaningful. This thing of thinking that people are denominationally aligned, when I did work over at the Heartland Church in Medina, well, they're on, right there on the main drag, they're Baptist, and you would never guess it. It's nowhere in their name. It's nowhere on the side of the building. It's just the Heartland Church. We are the Meadow Farm Church. But we make it clear, we are an independent Methodist congregation. You've got to tell that story. You've got to tell that story. So I would say you've got to lessen the fears of those who wonder, how will you ever get a pastor? And you've got to make sure they know they can hang on to their Methodist roots. And I don't know how anybody can argue that we want to be biblically oriented. How can anyone argue against that and say, well, we don't want to preach the Bible anymore, it's not relevant? It is relevant. It's up to us to show the relevance as a group of believers and as your pastors, that you have the right to hire if you disaffiliate. Kathy, tell us about our missions, because that's a question here.
Okay.
And Diane, too.
Local missions. We decided to, can't remember when we started. When we started, and we was going out of state doing mission work. And we did that for a couple years, and we decided that, you know what, the need around here is great. Why are we going down there when it's here? So we decided to do just local missions, and we do everything from, electrical work, plumbing, power washing houses. We've even cleaning gutters. Yeah, yeah. Just anything that, you can't do. Maybe a widow is, she just can't handle that stuff, and so we step in and do that. So through the year, but we also have I make a lot of sales too. But we just, our biggest job is we put in a handicap wheelchair for a family, a couple that was 80, ramp. It was, they're in their 80s. He's blind, and their front yard is all upstairs, going upstairs. We put in the backyard. That was a job, but did a good job. But it is.
I think the point is, you can find missions.
Yes.
Do them locally, right out of your
Word of
church.
mouth. We don't or advertise. It's getting out. And this little things and big things doesn't. Yeah. That's really.
And Diane, talk about what we do
Yes.
internationally.
Well, we have a fund called Black Wilkins, which Don Dills was our major person that helped us with all the legwork for the disaffiliation. He was the founder of it. And Black Wilkins stands for two old families that started here at Meadow Farm. And we sponsor international missionaries. That's the reasoning for our how we were set up. And we different places that we've sponsored, Seed Company that translates Bibles into language that people, because there's people out there that's never even heard about Jesus, and that's our goal, to support those type of missions. And we support 4 different mission areas, and we send them money quarterly. And our goal was to, or Don's goal was to raise $50,000 and keep it in an account. But at that time, $50,000 was making you some money. Of course, right now it's not making you very much money, but we've been able to make a lot more than that, and we support local, and we support those missionaries 4 times a year. So we've
And Ben.
yes, the general, yes, we support Ben Winsley, which is out of he's learning to be a airplane pilot, and mechanic, so he can fly his plane into places that before took people a long time to even walk to get there. So he can fly planes in and out. So that's our newest missionary we're supporting, and he's in Coshocton, Ohio. So, and then our other mission field is our fair stand. And our fair stand was originally established in the 60s by my parents' class to having a place to raise money and to be able to do improvements here at the church at that time. But we took over it about 93. Oh, it's been a while. 30 years ago, we took over it, running it, and it's kind of went into more of a mission. We now take the money, and because our church does so well that we can afford to make our own improvements here that need to be done, we take a good bit of it, I would say, 15,000.
Yes.
We normally make around 20,000 at the fair for 1 week, and we take 15,000 of it and donate to local organizations in the Zanesville area. 15,000.
15 different organizations.
Yeah, about 15 different organizations that we support. And even the year during the pandemic where we didn't have a fair, we were able to still support those people. So anyway, that's what we do.
What's in the stand? Fair
We
stand?
sell sausage sandwiches.
Oh,
It was originally Bob Evans.
It was originally Bob Evans.
And the Bob Evans company got to the point where we couldn't get their sausage, so we now get that local, from one of our local people, and we sell patties and also a link.
But also breakfast, that's our biggest.
Yeah. We serve breakfast, lunch.
Breakfast, the
We serve
breakfast,
breakfast.
we serve breakfast during the fair, and it's a huge thing. 600 to 700 for breakfast.
I think the big question is the one that, when you changed, how many members did you lose?
Okay, Sally can answer that.
No,
None?
none.
Because your vote was,
Yeah, our vote was, we only had one no vote. We didn't lose any, and we've gained some since then. In fact, we're gaining 2 next week.
Yeah. We continue, well, you know, we've all been through the pandemic, so that just, you know, that threw an unusual thing into this, but, yeah, we feel, I think everybody would agree with this, we feel we are a good ongoing church. We do have no debt, that does help. And, so and the people here, you know, we watch the budget. I mean, we don't just spend willy-nilly, but, we try to be prudent, and when people see that we are, I think, that gives them more confidence to give. And, I know we said we really weren't affected much, financially for the disaffiliation, but actually, we were, by the fact that the apportionments went away.
Exactly.
What else went away? Health insurance,
Pension.
pension, all that went away. So I would suggest to you that you do what in the accounting world we call pro forma statements, which means this. I think most of you are familiar with this. You say, well, here's what our budget looks like right now. Here's what it will look like after disaffiliation. I think it'll be interesting if you can get somebody who can work that for you, to show what it looks like when you no longer pay apportionments. Of course, you'll have other costs, you know, to take care of your pastor and do some of those things, but do a before disaffiliation, what the finances look like, and here's what they'll look like afterwards.
Do you still have your parsonage?
Yes.
The, number 8 there, is in regards to the growth of the church after this affiliation.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't hear anything addressed on that question.
Of course, Pastor Paul carried all that through the disaffiliation, but, I mean, I think the attendance here was way down, wasn't it, Diane and Sally, and then,
Yes.
anybody? That would help if you just had some numbers. I had heard you were down there where only 35 or 40 were coming, is that about right?
I'd say,
And then pre-pandemic, I know when I came here, of course, the pandemic, you faced all that too, right? And you're not totally back yet, are you? We aren't either. So, but when I came here, I know it was pretty common for me to be preaching in front of a 140 people a Sunday, that type of deal. I don't know how many you have coming now, but we have, if we hit 100, we're glad.
There's 85.
85, and I think we had 79 this week.
79.
So we're not too bad for a small church, you know.
We had, what was it, 85?
Plus we're online, which
109
helps.
online.
How many?
109 online.
Wow.
Well,
That's
Tim tells me
amazing.
we have close to 100 online. So we're on Facebook. If you ever want to just watch one of our services, you'll see that you can't tell. You can't tell we're not Methodist. And I believe what you just said, John, is really quite relevant. There's rumblings in these local United Methodist churches that if they keep going this way, you might just see us some Sunday. And so, yeah, we are getting people to come, but I think it's more people just, you know, seeking a place to worship. And they come for a while, and then they say, well, like today, got asked by a couple, can we join next Sunday? And I said, absolutely. And we've had baptisms recently, adult as well as infant. And so, you know, we continue to grow in that sort of a steady way. But I think, you can't say this for sure, but I think there is a possibility, and we don't proselytize, we don't go around trying to take people out of other churches. That's pretty sinful too. But we do know that people will look for a place to go where this says the sermons are relevant and they're biblically based. Take a Bible-based sermon and make it relevant, and that seems to work. So when you get right down to it, and that's why I don't want to be considered a pastor sitting here at this table, but when you get right down to it, this is mainly about clergy leadership, what brings people into church. Lovette Weems, who is another one of these guys that does a lot of research. I don't have the paper on this, so you have to take notes on this. He developed some information a few years ago, and this may surprise you. When people look for a church, I'm talking about first-time churchgoers, they typically look for a church that has a pastor within 7 years of their age. So what do you want to do in that regard? You've got to be able to reach younger people. And I think the way we do it is this. I'm 76, almost 77. So I've got to act youthful and still be active and pay attention to the kids. When you pay attention to the kids, you've got the parents and you've got the grandparents. But it also benefits me a little bit, being my age, because there's a lot of people my age that they need the hospital visits. The family needs the funerals. And I will tell you, I think there's a lot to be said about if Grandpa dies, there's nothing wrong with having a guy do the funeral who's got gray hair. Because there's some connection there. Maybe more so than a 30-something. And I'm not against young pastors by any means. But we pay a lot of attention to our youth, and we do it through our laity. We have junior church. We have Bible school.
Oh, do we have Bible school?
Do we ever have Bible school? Sally, you've got a class, We teach these kids, but we teach the kids. And when we do a children's message, which we never miss that. And we usually have kids, we do. Sometimes we have 12 to 14. Most generally we have about maybe 5 or 6. And I hear from churches that say, we have a children's message in the bulletin, but it never happens because there's no kids. That's discouraging when you hear people tell you that. But we don't get them up there and hand out lollipops and tell them how cute they are. We truly teach those kids when they're up front for a children's message. We make a point and we try to tie it right into what the sermon topic is for that day, and then they go off to junior church. I'm telling you, it works.
What's the age of our youngest scripture reader?
Yeah, we have a 10-year-old liturgist.
She's amazing.
And And we have a little stool that she stands on, a step stool, and she's right up there, mic level, and she reads. So we involve our youth. So that's how we have to overcome this age difference, and I don't see it as a huge impairment. I really don't. But, I mean, I'm just telling you what Levette Weems did come up with. Now, part of that was a study to try to get the United Methodist Church to be recruiting younger pastors, because at the time, only 5% of Methodist pastors were under the age of 35. We have got to get better leaders as clergy. It's not just a matter of being warm, fuzzy, and compassionate and delivering a sermon and then going off. You've got to provide leadership throughout the church. And you don't get any buys on this. You got to go do hospital visits. You got to be able to teach a Sunday school class. You got to be able to do a Bible study. You got to be able to do a children's message. And you can't just say, well, I'm not good at that, so we'll just get someone else to do that. You got to do it all. You got to deliver sermons. You got to understand the finances. You got to understand administration. And you've got to be that overall leader within the church. And when someone puts you down or anyone else down for saying, well, we're not a business. Oh, yes, you are. You're a business. And you can correct them immediately. The business is we try to grow Christ's kingdom and bring souls to Jesus. But there's an underlying business here too. You got to be good at what you do for the furtherance of this church. I think a natural consolidation of churches pretty much has to take place. Whether or not they'll stay Methodist is a question that is a hard one to answer, because the younger you get, the less affinity there is to a denomination. They don't care that much about denominations.
The older ones will.
The older ones do. And they still like that affiliation, and you've already said that was important here, that you still were Wesleyan, believers, Methodist.
That's the key.
Make sure that's in your story, and it's got to be a compelling part of your story. Keep telling that story and tell it completely in all that. Because you already heard me say, if you leave gaps in your story, it gets filled with misinformation, questions and fears. Just what you don't want.